Hi, I'm Maura Jortner, author of 102 Days of Lying About Lauren. It starts like this. Rules to live by. Number 1, don't tell anyone where you live. Number 2, don't tell lies. Number 3, don't steal. Number 4, don't look out the window. Number 5, pretend to know more than you do. Lies told. Number 1, I told Hector I was 16. Number 2, I told Anna I turned 16 in April. Number 3, I told Juan the quesadillas I ordered were paid for. I've told him this for 102 days in a row. Number 4, I told Kat that Lauren Sussex was dead. She isn't. Lauren Sussex is me. Chapter 1. Every morning, the skeleton rooster let out a cock-a-doodle-doo that could shake a person to their very core. It was so loud you could hear it all the way to the long line of silver turnstiles where the guests waited to get into this amusement park. That rooster clung to his perch on the top of the scary farmhouse with the nastiest pair of bony rooster feet you ever saw. The scary farmhouse was 2 attractions down from the haunted house of horrors, so I considered him a neighbor. I called him Mr. Noisy McSkinnybones because I thought it was funny, and I tried to hold on to a sense of humor, despite everything. Normally, when I heard Mr. Noisy McSkinnybones give everyone that "wake up now" farmhouse shout, I was already sneaking past the Bloody River Rapids ride, edging my way along the outer wall of the park. Today, though, when he let his cock-a-doodle-doo rip, I was still lying on the floor with a thin beach towel tucked under my head, holding my old Barbie doll close to my face. The Barbie's name was Pretty Dolly because 1, I got her when I was really little, and 2, no one around me had the guts to argue. Heck, no one said a word about it. Life is tragic sometimes. The towel I had was threadbare in places, but it was long enough to wrap around my neck and tuck under my head, so I pretended it was a blanket and a pillow. If anyone asked, I was all set. I had a blanket and a pillow. Thank you very much. I was fine. When the last notes of Mr. Noisy McSkinnybones' call faded into the morning air, I jolted up so fast both the towel and Pretty Dolly went flying. What the cream cheese and jelly? Why was I still sleeping? If the skeleton rooster was cock-a-doodle-dooing, it was 7:30, a half hour before the guests would arrive. And if it was 7:30, I had overslept a lot. Crab weasels with skinny, scary chickens on top. I would have run to the small window that hung on the north wall and looked out, but that would break number 4, don't look out the window. And those rules had been written for important reasons, so I stopped myself and did the next best thing. I took a few steps back. When you stood at just the right spot in this attic-like room and held your neck at just the right angle, you could see the sky outside. Cloudy, dark. That's why I'd overslept. It was sunny 90% of the time in Florida. Every morning the sun's rays would find me through the window, and it was like being kissed awake. That's what I would say if anyone asked anyway. The other 10% of the time was usually in the afternoon. A quick thunderstorm would blow in, dump a bunch of rain, and then clear out. Cloudy in the morning almost never happened, or at least I'd never seen it happen here before. The last few days had been so hot and muggy it was like living in somebody's armpit. Maybe cloudy meant a cold front was blowing in, or maybe it meant a storm. I didn't give it much thought either way because the real problem with the clouds this morning was that Tanner would beat me to the ghost town entrance marker. I had to rush. I had to win this race. Tanner and I had been racing to the ghost town entrance marker since early May. It was a game I started and a challenge I maintained. One of the reasons I kept it going was because I always won, and winning was a great way to start the day. I won every day because I cheated, of course. Living here in this park gave me an edge, but Tanner didn't know that. No one did. Rule number 1, don't tell anyone where you live. This morning would require extra speed. I wrapped Pretty Dolly in the towel and settled her on the floor, telling her I'd see her later, then pulled my fingers through my long brown hair and gathered it into a ponytail, no time for braiding. Then I threw my borrowed employee t-shirt over my old blue t-shirt, brushed off my shorts, and grabbed my water bottle. I tugged on my sneakers and hop-trotted to the ladder and stepped onto the rungs. I was going fast, too fast, and you don't want to rush on ladders, I reminded myself. In fact, I might have to make that rule number 6 at some point. It seemed like an important thing to remember. No good would come from a broken neck, but official rules weren't written until they had to be. If I ever fell down that ladder and broke a ton of bones and lived to talk about it, it'd be time to make that rule. Until then, I was good. Well, okay, good but late. Once I got to the 3rd floor, I hurried down the long, winding employee access route leading to the ground floor, and I rushed out the emergency exit that didn't lock right. My pet spider, Leggy, lived in the fake graveyard just outside the haunted house of horrors, and normally I'd stop to say hi. I told Leggy everything, but today I didn't have the time. "See you soon, girl," I called as I booked it past her web. Truth be told, I didn't know whether Leggy was a girl or not. I'd like to think that she was, and look, there was no way to find out without getting really darn close, so I went with it. Lately, she hadn't looked good. A few days ago, a bunch of bumps appeared all over her body. They lined her torso up and down, and I didn't know what they were. Did spiders get diseases? Maybe. That thought didn't make me feel good. If Leggy died, well, this place wouldn't be the same without her. I needed her. As I rushed past the part of the cemetery that had the creepy crypts and the ghastly tombs, I told myself spiders were hardy animals and she'd be okay. I was 95% sure. Okay, maybe 90. It could be natural, right? Maybe spiders developed bumps and lived for another 20 years. I was 85% sure. As I rounded the side of the haunted house, I told myself not to think about it anymore because I didn't want those numbers to keep going down. I'd see her later, and that's what I told myself. I had to get to the ghost town entrance marker. The employees were already walking around the park. Worse, some of them had reached their destinations. They were setting up kiosks, yawning as they unlocked restaurants and arranging tables and chairs under awnings. They were restocking booths with water bottles, battery-operated personal fans, and bubble blowers. They were brewing coffee and baking muffins. Dang it, I was late. Normally, when I headed this way, it was empty. I'd sneak through this part of the park, staying hidden to avoid the security cameras, and then I could sidle up right next to the Jinx carousel and jump into the crowd of employees starting toward their stations without anyone noticing. But today, the park was swimming with people. Tanner was going to beat me crud muffins. He was probably already there. As I hurried my butt towards the entrance marker, I pictured Tanner in my head. He would be cultivating an air of boredom, playing up the fact that he'd won. His legs would be crossed at the ankles. He might even be fake cleaning his fingernails, only looking up every now and then to see if he could spot me. He'd let a ghost of a smile play on his lips, telling himself he was keeping a straight face. We had raced the same race all summer long, and I had beaten him every time. Each morning he'd shake his head and say, "How do you do it, Mouse?" I answered him with a shrug and an, "Oh, I don't know." That was the best way to answer. I didn't want to accidentally tell him my secret, so I kept it simple. A shrug and a claim not to have any real idea. Because I had to follow rule number 1. Don't tell anyone where you live. Tanner said he knew how I beat him. He was convinced it had to do with parking. He said he was sure I had a super secret space that gave me the lead. I didn't have the heart to tell him that I didn't know exactly where the employee parking lot was, that I didn't have a super secret place to leave my car, and that, in fact, I didn't have a car and I wasn't old enough to drive. I wasn't old enough for anything that I did in this park, not old enough to get a job, not old enough to be a walkway sweeper, not old enough to be living on my own. I was 12, but everyone thought I was 16. Sure, some did because I told them that, but others assumed it because of my height. I'm tall. Tall for a 12-year-old and just tall in general. Add that to my killer smile and folks believed I was a teenager old enough to work here. I had a park employee shirt that I had borrowed, long story, and a pin that looked enough like a name tag, so bingo bango, done. In their minds, I was legit. Plus, no one looked closely in this amusement park, especially at an employee who swept the walkways. As I rounded the Jinx carousel, I got a glimpse of Tanner. He had blue eyes and red hair and wore cool sneakers each day, a new pair every week, or so it seemed to me. Now he stood near the entrance marker, and it was worse than I imagined. He wasn't pretending to be bored. He was beaming, a smile as wide as the Atlantic Ocean. His head swiveled back and forth, and his eyes were literally sparkling. My steps slowed and then stopped, and I felt a hard tug in the pit of my stomach. I was the big loser, for real. Even though I had started out late, I hadn't quite believed it would happen. I always won. It was my jam. But not today. For a moment, I considered simply grabbing my broom and dustpan and heading off to work. I could bump into Tanner later in the day and pretend I'd forgotten about our tradition. Oh, I could say, were we still doing that? But a second later, I threw out that idea. Tanner deserved this win. He had lost for 102 days, and he had been a good sport about it. I should be too. I told my feet to walk on over and tried my best to smile as I did. Tucking my hands in my pockets, I strolled up. Morning. His eyes got real big, taking me in. Then his smile grew even wider, like a full open mouth look of victory and happiness with a little bit of shock that he'd actually done it. He'd actually won mixed in. But he didn't greet me. He didn't point to himself and say, winner! He started, get this, dancing. The guy rocketed into a victory celebration like no one had ever seen. He jumped up and down. He did a move like a robot walking in a weird way and then did it again in reverse. He swung his hips. He dabbed. He did the floss. He threw his arms up and ran around in tight circles. Really embarrassing stuff, if you asked me. Still, I let him have his moment, even if he was going way too far. When he went in for a high five, I gave him one. Great job, I said. You finally won. Can't talk, he said. More triumph. I waited patiently for him to finish whatever this weird victory dance thing was, but it didn't end. Are you done yet? I asked when he was doing this crazy move that included kicking his feet high. No way, he said, and he launched into a super dorky strut that made him look like a human peacock hybrid. I waited. You're embarrassing yourself. You know that, right? You're jealous of my moves. He spread out the word moves like it had 3 O's in it. I made friends with a girl on a playground once who had 3 older brothers. They're annoying, she told me, but also kind of funny in an odd boy way. That summed up Tanner. This must be what it was like to have a brother. He ended his dance by falling to his knees, holding his hands high above his head and making sounds like a huge crowd was cheering for him. Wow, I said, giving him a slow clap. Just wow. He rose. Awesome, right? Not exactly the word I would use, but you won. Congratulations. He made that cheering sound again. Don't worry, I said. I'll kick your butt tomorrow. Doubtful, he said. I found a new parking place. He nodded at me while holding his chin like he had all the wisdom in the world. I overslept, ding dong. End of story. That's why you won. His face fell at hearing that, but he recovered quickly. We'll see about that, he challenged. I needed a change of subject or he might start dancing again. Where are you stationed today? I asked. He jutted a thumb toward the haunted house of horrors, pushing the big red button. Ooh, good assignment, I said, because it was. Whoever got to run the ride was allowed to cackle into the microphone and tell the guests to have a spooktacular time before pushing the red button and sending them zipping off. It seemed like a fine way to spend the day if you asked me. Where are you? He asked. Sweeping the south end of the park, I said, ghost town included. I made it sound like fun, like it was a new and exciting assignment, but it's what I did every day. Tanner's face got all scrunched up. Sweeping again? You've worked here for months, Mouse. You want to ask them for a change. They could get you a better assignment, I bet. He scrunched up. He scratched his wrist. I'd offered to ask my dad about it, but he doesn't really deal with the ins and outs of park employee stuff. Also, he hasn't been home much lately, so I didn't want Tanner to feel bad about it, and I certainly didn't want him to ask his dad about anything about me. That could be dangerous. So I said, no, I like sweeping. And I said it as if I really loved it. Truth was, it was hot walking around all day, and sometimes by the end of the night, the muscles in my right hand ached from gripping the broom. In my first week here, blisters erupted all over my left hand from the dustpan handle. They'd healed by now, good thing. These days, it was only my right hand that would get tired and achy and complainy. Still, I didn't let on. People who didn't actually work at the park didn't get to be choosy about what assignments they pretended to get. Bottom line was I could sweep without attracting much attention, so I swept and I pretended to like it. End of story. But it's so gross, Tanner said. Not as bad as you think, I said, and I raised my eyebrows at him. That's what the broom and dustpan are for, keeping away from nastiness. Well, if you want me to put a word in, he said, not with my dad, but maybe with Darren. He's pretty nice about stuff like that. Darren was Tanner's manager. I knew this because he had mentioned him before. But I didn't want Tanner talking to Darren about me either. Still dangerous. No need, I'm happy with my broom, honest, I said, and I wished him well at the haunted house of horrors. Tanner and I first became friends because of his sister. The day I met him, he stared at me for a super long time. I'm talking like it was getting creepy. That stare was so long. So I did what I do in situations like that. I faced it head on. What you looking at, Mr. McStarry? I asked. He looked surprised, but then faced it head on too. You look like my sister, he said. Sorry if I was staring. You could be her twin. At the end of the sentence, on the word twin, his voice cracked in a way that sounded like his heart had broken into tiny, pointy shards. I've always been bad with emotions. They make me feel hot and squishy inside, and I never know what to say or do with my hands and my face. What was I supposed to do with my face when someone felt something? Should I smile in a knowing way or frown? I could nod, but that didn't feel right either. There were always so many choices, so many ways to play a reaction. So that thing with Tanner's voice, how it cracked in a way that sounded physically painful, that kicked me into overdrive. Oh, I might look like her, I told him, but I bet you she's real quiet and sweet and knows when to shut up, not me. People say I'm salty. They say I don't know when to stop talking. They say I should do myself a favor and keep my mouth shut, like all the time. I paused for a moment for timing. You can see I don't listen to what they have to say. Tanner let go of his broken heart and cracked a smile. She would like you, he said, and it kind of sounded like he didn't care if I just made a fool of myself, rambling on like that. I challenged him to a race, and we had been friends ever since. It worked out well. He didn't mind when I got all chatty, and I didn't mind when he did dorky victory dances. If he knew more about me, he might not want to be my friend. That's why I kept the personal stuff to myself. It's the end of chapter 1.